fortunate that I've got a couple open board seats in my pocket. So when the CEO of some big company retires, and in their announcement of retirement note that what they really want to do is do things related to Humane Society, and they say that in some way, immediately the board chair calls them up and says, lunch. And we would like to get you onto the board now. And so you don't wait for the annual cycle, etc.
Are you saying we should consider changing how people enter the board? Because it is yearly, unless they're filling an open seat.
A lot of organizations do this, where the membership votes on
Correct.
who serves on the board, but it's almost always exactly as you've described. Almost nobody shows up other than the board.
Correct.
Back when I was on Citizens First Credit Union board, a few people showed up, mostly because we gave away money. It was a credit union, so we got them there by giving away money. But it wasn't very many people, and you know, the board always nominated folks, and they always got elected because, you know, the board may not have been the majority, but it was a pretty good share, and if you count the board members and their spouses, it was probably the majority of folks in the room. And so, yeah, to me, it's...
You're really a self-perpetuating board. I mean, in reality,
It's
you don't have a membership constituency that votes you in. You're really self-perpetuating.
Correct.
Yeah, and I would modify it to you are self-perpetuating. So that you have a board management committee that recommends.
Looks at credentials
Yeah.
and recommends.
And recommends, and then you
meets
get
with them.
added to the board because the board voted you on the board.
Right.
And it's effectively what you're doing now. You just have this facade of a membership meeting,
Right.
and I wouldn't have a
But you
board.
said that makes you nervous, right? Didn't you tell me that?
Well, one of my concerns was, you know, when you get into the membership and the membership votes on the board members, there was a situation that happened in Dane County with their particular Humane Society, and it made me smile when you had mentioned, Nicole, people moving in. But there are, for a perfect example is they were a kill shelter.
Okay.
So this particular group of individuals that were members wanted to change that mission. And so they came on and got all their board members, or the people who had this agenda, and then
To
they
show up at the member meeting.
as members, and of course, that's exactly what happened, is all the other board members that were up for election got voted out, these new people got voted on. So it's kind of a loaded kind of membership type thing.
And I don't think that's how you, if there's a significant issue, I mean, obviously being a kill or a non-kill is
Yes.
about as huge as it can be. I don't know that the way you want to decide that is by
Like who shows up at a meeting.
who shows up at a meeting and who marshals
I
folks.
agree.
And I didn't know this was an issue, and so my folks didn't, and yada, yada. Now, would you allow sort of like referendum that they have in California, which sometimes works and sometimes is a disaster, members to recommend a resolution with X number of, you know, it's got to be beforehand, et cetera, and then there could be voting on a resolution by the members. So the members would have some ultimate power if you want, particularly if membership costs something, and that is one of the ways you raise money, and you want to keep the members happy campers, maybe.
But
But
you're kind of recommending to not give the members power, that it's really remains
Right.
within the board.
Right.
Would your concern be that the board management committee might be loaded in a certain direction and?
Oh, sure, absolutely. You could have a board, you know, I mean, I've been here 22 years, and so I've seen a lot of people come and go on the board, and so you can have people who have their own agenda, and they spread that out through the board, and then suddenly you're going in a different direction that, as an organization, or as staff and other people, you didn't think you were going in, but, you know, that's just the way it is.
And the ultimate test there is, does the board elect those people to the board? And if the board elects those people to the board, that's what you got.
Right, exactly.
And that really is what you've already got, because if the board, what I'm hearing is that the board wants to elect those people to the board, you're doing it at the annual membership meeting, in which the board's going to dominate and elect those people to the board anyway.
Correct.
And it doesn't, by doing it that way, there's really not much vetting of members. I mean,
Would you, but is there a possibility, for instance, let's say these three individuals over here have, you know, they're all friends and they hang out together and they really like cats and, you know, sorry, Dave. But, and so they have their own personal agenda that they kind of want to work through the Humane Society, so maybe they, you know, someone else comes on board and he's like really a dog guy and, you know, and like, let's not vote for them.
Well, that certainly could happen, and then that becomes a question of what the full board does.
Right.
And I don't know how you prevent that, and I'm not even sure it's bad in that it's allowing the focus of the organization to evolve based on what the majority of the board thinks how it ought to evolve. Now, I guess the surreptitious is, the three of us have a real focus on, we want the Humane Society to really focus on snakes. We don't do nearly enough to adopt and do snakes and exotics or something. So we quietly nominate some folks to the board who also are really into exotics, and we don't tell anybody, and we gain control. I don't think, I
You're
think
saying
that's,
it's a matter of trust.
it's a matter of trust, and that's awfully
If we get
Machiavellian
less
stuff to gain
information from the
control.
director, we are trusting that things are progressing, and the director has to trust the board as well.
Yeah, I think,
Being
absolutely.
someone
Try
that
to
goes to
put it in
diversity
the-
of your board and making sure you
Yeah.
have
A
a
diverse
well-diversified
board.
board.
Sure.
Because then they shouldn't be hopefully colluding negatively, you know?
And if you've done what Al suggested of getting people on your strategic planning
Right.
committee, that are gonna be people who are the logical ones to lead your
Right.
board, so you've got a farm system,
Or other committees.
or other committees, absolutely, then you know something about their focus, you know something about their temperament before they ever get on the board.
But this concern with the board members is no different than like the Dane County situation.
Only
where
with their
you-
members.
So it's, you know,
Right.
It really is a horse apiece.
yeah,
Yeah.
so we just
Yeah.
have to decide what we
Yeah.
want to do.
Yeah.
I have a question for you. Does your strategic plan drive who you recruit for your board?
Absolutely, absolutely, those could be, A could influence B.
Okay.
Because if you decide, for example, that we're going to do significant physical construction, we're going to be expanding the physical facility, now do I have greater interest in having some board members who have connections with the city or the county to get zoning approval, that understand building issues, that, you know, et cetera. I think we're going to need to be borrowing significant dollars to make this new construction happen. Do I need somebody who understands the banking industry?
If you're moving into fundraising, someone with
Right.
experience. with
Absolutely,
development.
absolutely.
Okay.
But I would not likely put somebody on the board in that situation who was a contractor.
Probably not.
Because I think that would just muddy.
That really
the
creates
water.
conflict of interest questions.
But a retired, well-known.
A retired contractor who knows the business, sure.
Now,
Not someone who
Gonna bid
wants
on
to,
the- right.
could bid on it.
but let me hit the conflict of interest, because let's do it this way. Megan's on the board, and you need to go out and borrow some money.
She's our banker.
Well, do you use her bank or not?
Last time I argued ethically, because I had talked to someone, we had to
We didn't
extend
argue,
more
we
than one
discussed.
request.
Okay, but is she excluded?
No,
And to me, that's got to be the answer. Because if you're going to ask someone like Megan to serve on the board, and then what she gets out of the deal is her business is excluded from the potential of bidding, and she's got to go back to her colleagues and
No.
say, because I do this volunteer work, we as an organization are losing
no,
business.
they can bid.
That's
They can-
that's a pretty tough sell on the home front.
No, they can bid.
I don't have a concern about conflict of interest. I love conflict of interest. Conflict of interest tells me you're doing stuff. I'm a little nervous about it. I got a board, nobody on the board has any potential conflict of interest. Well, what rocks did you bring them out from? I mean, how many people do you know in this community, Bob? How many of you worked with in some capacity over the last 20 years that you have some relationship with? I don't know what I could do that I wouldn't run into a conflict of interest Bob would have somewhere.
Gee, and I know both you and Al.
Conflict of interest. I know Megan. I mean, you know, that's, my bias isn't that, I love conflict of interest. I think the key is simply to note it up front.
Right.
Sure.
And I'm sure.
So everybody knows, Barry and Al and I all worked at the university together and we're friends. And I'm a fan of Barry. And I recommended a book you wrote to somebody earlier today.
Thank you.
You know, so we go back a bit. But
I assume you've got, code of ethics or board behavior stuff.
Yes, every new board member has to sign that.
So-
Yeah.
What about board tenure and
Let's talk about that one. That's a good one.
About what? I'm sorry.
Board tenure, folks, I like 3-year terms. I think 3 years is a good,
Right, we have
Length.
three-year terms.
and then you're off.
For a year, you can return if voted on, or it may be if recommended by the board management committee.
All right,
Again,
let me drop back to what you're trying to accomplish and think about an alternative. I think what you're trying to accomplish is you need some fresh blood on the board.
Correct.
One of the organizations, it was a retirement community, I was doing consulting work with, and this was years and years and years ago, but I was relatively young when I started the business. And I was helping this board do some board structure stuff. And we got to the issue of board tenure. How long have you all been on the board? Every member of the board had been on the board longer than I had been alive. This was a relatively stagnant board. Now, I was young, but
That was a
still,
long time ago.
I had a PhD, so I must have been 26, 27, 20. I was somewhere in there.
At least 12.
Yeah, I was at least 12 on the Dookie Howser. I was in my 20s. So, but really, they hadn't put a new person on the board in like 25 years. This is not good. Okay? However, I'm a fan of some board members who've been around forever. Because I think there's a certain institutional memory. So, so Bob's maybe been on and off or something to play the game of, because you've been on the board, you said, for 20 some odd years. That's more than 9. You're more of an accountant than I am, but.
Bylaws are 9 or 10 years.
Oh, okay.
yeah,
Okay.
the change, that was a change, so.
See, and I don't, if Bob wants to serve and Bob's being useful on the board, I don't want him to go off for a year and maybe not come back. I'm fine with having board members that have been on the board for 30 years, without a break. I think it's wonderful. Organizational memory, organizational history, getting good board members is tough. If you got somebody who's serving a purpose and they're doing a great job on the board, why would you want to lose them?
So how would you write the bylaws? Is a percentage of the board may serve?
Yeah.
A percentage of the board should be in their first term,
Okay.
or maybe first or second term.
First or second or.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So 15% of the board, 10% of the board, maybe even a number, if you can, you know, your board, that at least 3 members of the board have been on the board for no more than 2 terms.
Yeah, but if you do the percentage, it's easier if you're gonna deal with the bylaws.
Yeah,
And
you
just-
can do it either way. And you kind of think through
And
what.
you can either do 3 or less, or you could do 10 or more.
Yeah.
But I think more is the churn on the young
So
side
you
and
want
the top side.
X percent have to be on the board.
Would have to be in their first or
In their
second
first or second term, because what I want is fresh blood. I don't care how many are,
Got it.
but I want some people who are asking, well, you know, probably a dumb question because I'm new, and often that dumb question because I'm new turns out to be a great question.
Yes,
Do you have bylaws that are like a?
the best, an
Well,
exemplar.
an example of.
I don't
some
have
bylaws
bylaws,
that you
but
would
I
go by.
have a job description for the board, a job description for the board chair, job description for the CEO management committee, job description for the board management committee, board job description for all this stuff, which I will happily send you after tonight. I just want to send it to you now because you just spent the night looking at it.
In bylaws, you know, I've got a variety of bylaws,
I'd
but.
say I've seen,
I think-
they vary so
Yeah.
drastically.
Yeah.
To me, that's not what really matters.
But you want to keep them simple, right?
Yes.
You, in raw.
Yeah, I mean, you
So-
need to define membership, define, you know, how you get people on the board, size of the board.
So that would go in the bylaws, the board management committee, all credentials.
Or.
You could have in the bylaws that you have a board management committee,
That
which is
oversees-
responsible for recommending
And
to the
that's it.
board rules
That's
with
right.
regard to tenure, et cetera, et
And
cetera.
then we decide the rules and then.
And you can change those then from
Change
time
them.
to time.
They're just
I wouldn't be
rules.
inclined to write in that it's X
Got
percent that is in their first 2 terms because you may decide to change that later,
Just the board management committee is responsible for the board.
recommending to the board.
Do you have to have any specific committees in
No.
your bylaws?
No,
That nothing has to be established?
no, no. No, you, under the law, and I've got an attorney and it's always nervous when I'm starting to give legal, I'm not giving legal
No, you're
advice.
not
but I'm
giving
talking
legal-
about
you don't know enough about to give legal advice.
But, yeah, I clearly am not.
So you're saying the bylaws would read, the board has the power to establish whatever committees are necessary for the functioning
Sure.
of OAHS.
Yeah.
then-
And to establish rules governing the
Got it.
appointment and tenure
Yes.
of.
the members.
And I think there's something,
You have to meet.
help me, Amy, this is more your turf than mine, but
Not all.
as an incorporated entity, you need to have a board chair, you need to have a treasurer. There's certain stuff that you need to have, but it's more officers of the board than it is committees.
And I think you have to say you meet at least once a year.
Yeah, and there has to be an official meeting, and there's, and I,
What about attendance? Our bylaws do say that members are expected to attend. Is it
I
75%?
wouldn't put that in there, but let me go back to what the board management committee does. In addition to, first of all, I want to think about makeup of the board. I'm going to get to the management of, in terms of the people on. But I think Al's nailed it in terms of, you want a grid that says, we would like to have people from maybe various geographic areas, various areas of expertise, maybe relationships. We'd like to have somebody who's associated with XYZ organizations because those are useful contacts to have. You can look at all kinds of profiles, what we would like, and then you look at who you've got, and then you look at the openings, and then you go out and say, well, ideally, we'd like to have a board member that looks like blah, blah, blah.
And getting back to Barry's question, that each year, the board management committee should be reviewing that profile. It should be reviewing the expectations of each board member. Has this board member been, they come, but they never say anything. Well, that's not necessarily a good thing. So you want the board management committee to really look at the board members and say, hey, do you really want to be on this board? And I've done that. I've had where we've gone out and said, boy, you've missed about a third of the meetings, and the ones you come to, you come late, you leave early. Are you really committed to this? Is this really something you want to do?
And I'll bet usually people are saying, thank you for giving me an opportunity to get on the board.
Yeah, they're happy to say, look, I just can't do it.
If they are a big supporter though, is that okay?
I'm a big fan of board member emeriti. So I'm a big fan of, you've got somebody who's been on the board, there may be a big supporter. If they want to continue to be on the board and they don't ever attend a meeting, but they write me a check for $10,000 a year,
Yeah.
I'll leave them on the board and take the check. I mean, I have these principles and guidelines, and then I can be bought. And sometimes symphony boards are often like this. A lot of people want to be on the symphony board because it's kind of cool to be on the symphony board. So you have a symphony board that's maybe made up of 30 people, and there's an expectation that every one of them writes a check for $1,000 or $5,000 or something to the organization. And then you have an executive committee of 7, which is really the board of the symphony that does all the heavy lifting. And the symphony board meets twice a year, once in an annual meeting and once before a symphony for a dinner thing. And the big thing that the symphony board does is they write checks. Fine, take the money. If you got people who want to give you money, find a way to make it work.
Well, and I think it's important, even with someone who may not be always wanting to pipe up in a meeting, that maybe they're willing to contribute,
In other
on
ways,
the side, 'cause,
sure. But you ought to be having discussions.
Yeah.
How are you contributing? And I want to think about, I want to think about your role on the board. What are you doing? How are you contributing? I want to think about how that's going to evolve. You're on the board now. Would you be interested in? We have a board chair, we have a treasurer, but that's going to be evolving. Would you be interested in the future potentially in being a board member? So or a board chair. So maybe we do some professional development things. You're currently on the CEO management committee. You haven't been on the strategic planning committee. Prior to being board chair, it'd probably be good to also be on that committee because you're going to learn stuff. Years and years ago, I'll do an Evergreen did it right. Evergreen asked me to serve on the finance committee. And I was like, and this was David Ward, and I was like, David, why do you want me to serve on the finance committee? You're the finance prof, and I'm an HR guy. I don't know nothing about the numbers, and I'm never really going to know about it. It's not where I live. He said, we know you don't know anything about the numbers, Dale. That's the point. We think you might move up to a leadership role on the board. We don't expect you to make any contribution to the finance committee, on the finance committee. We expect you to learn something. That's the only reason you're there. We don't expect any expertise out of you. I said, okay, on that criteria, I will serve on the finance committee.
And one of the boards I'm on right now, we had built a succession plan for the board chair. And now we're stuck because the next one up left town.
And so you want some
So
flexibility
now,
built in
right,
and.
so we need to work on developing and getting someone ready.
The other thing I like to ask board members is, why are you serving on this board? Yeah. What are you getting out of this deal? Why are you here? I mean, is it just the food? You're hungry? I mean, what?
Good. Thank you, David.
It looks like very good food, but why do you want to serve on this board? Is it you enjoy the volunteer stuff and you enjoy participating on the board due to the mission and you just got a real passion for that stuff? Is it some contacts that it gives you? What is it about serving on this board that makes it fulfilling and something you want to do? There are plenty of volunteer activities, there's plenty of stuff you could do. Why do you want to serve on this board? Not because I'm trying to talk you out of it, but because I want to be screwing my head into, this is what John wants to get out of being on the board. I'm trying to make darn certain that we find a way to make sure that happens for John. Because, you know, this is a two-way street. I want people to serve on the board. I want them to be committed. I want them to get whatever they want out of being on the board. I'd like to, you know, see them get that. So I'm going to evaluate. I'm also going to do the development thing with board members. I think is really important. And that's where I'm going to go after things like attendance. Now, again, I wouldn't have the board chair do that. I wouldldn't have the chair of the board
No,
be
chair
the
of the
person
board
who sits down with each board member and
That would be
says,
the board management?
that would be board management committee, and I think Al's described it, every year I would have a conversation with every board member saying, let's think about your performance, pros, cons, etc., and I'd have the board management committee think about that, and I would be asking, you know, what's your future? Bob, you think you're going to be here for another 20 years? What do you want to do? You know.
He's planning on being somewhere for 20 years.
Well, I mean,
What you're saying is the amount of work we're going to be doing as board members is going to be going up if we're doing it correctly.
the work may be going up, or it may be primarily shifting. Because what I find is that often as boards do this kind of stuff, they move, it just naturally gravitates them out of some of the operational stuff they tended to get sucked into before, and maybe just sort of filled the calendar. And it also changes the makeup of who wants to be on the board and what you find rewarding about being on a board. That the more you do strategic stuff, the more you're doing long-term thinking, etc., that tends to result in a different kind of person saying, well, these are interesting meetings. Just because it tends
I'm
to be
thinking
more.
that the board management committee is meeting individually with each board member, that's going to take some time.
Reasonably, when you think about a board member's time commitment to an organization, what is the real expectation for, and I know that could vary depending on projects, but
But it's a reason why and I wouldn't go right away, because I think it would be culture shock. But I would seriously consider going to meetings every 2 months, and I would consider then thinking about these committees as how you get more of the work done.
Right.
And the board meeting is more of a reporting up, so it may not
From
be.
the committees. The committees
Reporting for the
report to the
committees.
board.
Now, yeah.
So it may not be that the board meeting is that much longer, but what we're shifting to is, every other month you have a meeting of the board management committee that you're on that does the board management committee work, and every other meeting you have a meeting of the board that does the board work, which is mostly filtered up from the committees.
and does
What about total? Go ahead.
does every person, should the expectation be that every board member is on a committee?
I think so. That's my view.
Yeah, I would agree.
Everybody should be on.
I would agree.
That's part of the expectation, is you serve on.
I mean, yeah, you'd think you'd want, why else, if that's what you shift to, there is no other reason for you to be on the board. I mean, because
Right,
now
right.
it becomes
Just
a
come
listening
listen.
session. at a
Board
board
chair
member.
may not be on one of these committees because they're kind of on every committee as need be. Not uncommon that you will have a requirement that if you've got a president-elect, a board chair-elect, that they serve on the strategic planning committee, because that really screws their head into where's the organization going to go in the next 3 to 5 years, and if I'm going to be the chair of the board in the next 3 to 5 years, I probably ought to be owning that.
So what is the role of the board chair then? I mean, what,
I really see the board chair as doing two things. They're managing the meeting, and then they're the face of the board. And it's
to
really...
whom? Face of the board to whom?
It's everybody.
Externally.
It's a head of state role. They're the queen.
And they also
I
play
mean,
a
because
role.
I really think about that and I'm like, well then, they're not,
That's pretty easy, that's a lot
I
less
was
than
gonna
I'm
say
doing now. I
realistically,
love
there's
that.
not a lot
But,
of,
I know how
But
to
you
run a
got-
meeting and,
Yeah, but you do have monitoring on what's going on with the committees.
so you're the Jewish mother.
They're-
in
Well,
essence.
yeah, and they're gonna
Yeah.
often look to you for, all right, here's a problem we're having, what do you think we ought
But
to
you're
do?
the obsessive going, what about this, and you haven't reported on that, and we talk.
You're not so much the, yeah, I think it's more the, as you said, that if there's a committee that says, look, we've got this issue, we'd like you to attend one of our committee meetings because we think you'd have insight that's useful, you do that. And there are all kinds of sort of the ceremonial things where, you know, the board really ought to be represented at. And so someone from the Humane Society Board ought to be at interacting with the United Way thing, dealing with the community at something.
We don't like the United Way.
Well,
They won't let us be listed.
Yeah, is that true?
What?
Oh, yeah, yeah, I know.
Yes, it is.
Huh?
well,
Use another example.
no, I think it's a perfect example.
Particularly since I've got to leave in a few minutes because I've been up since 3 o'clock this morning and I got to be at Hoffmaster at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning.
For United Way.
On United
On
Way
United Way.
business. But, you know, I think it's a fine example then of, okay, if someone's going to have a discussion with the United Way to try and change that, board chair makes sense to be a person who does that.
It's national, so
Yeah, well, and that's, but
I hear you.
But any time where you're looking at, the board ought to be represented. This could be an employee who's been here for a long time who retires. And it'd be kind of slick for a board member to show up for the lunch and say, hey, from a board perspective, we wanted to give you the thank you, yada, yada, and the board chair does that and waves and plays queen and yada, yada.
Queen, not
The-
dictator, right?
What?
Queen, not dictator.
Queen, not dictator. And it's very much, this role is very much like the queen is head of state.
Well,
She reads the speech to Parliament, to start Parliament, that the Prime Minister gave her, and she reads whatever the Prime Minister said.
the other piece of that though is if the organization has, and you have some interaction with the city or the county or government agencies, we've kind of,
At the media,
at the media, that's the board chair. You don't push the director to have to negotiate or deal with those other entities. The board chair needs to be the face of that and be the interaction with that
What
group.
I was the government.
Government,
Oh.
because it's tough for the director to do that because the director's gonna have ongoing interactions
Exactly.
potentially with that organization. The chair of the board likely won't, and so the chair needs to represent the board on policy-related matters. Now, if there's a question about how was a certain money spent, well, the director has to figure that out. But the chair of the board really interacts with those agencies and the
Right.
policy.
right?
Are we not covering or asking things we should be as a board? As you get a sense of this?
I think you're asking the right questions. The thing I would note is the timing of making this evolution happen. This is not an evolution that happens quickly. And the analogy I would make is you have monthly board meetings that last an hour. So it would take you, in a course of a year, you have 12 hours, and maybe you have twice as much because you have other stuff. You have 24 hours of interaction as a board. In most organizational life, you're talking about 3 days. So to evolve the board in terms of the focus and what they do, it may seem that it's going granularly slow because it's taking us 3 years to make this evolution. Yeah, it's taking 3 years, but it's also taking 36 hours. So, you know, if you're looking at making some changes, I would make 1 or 2 small ones, work on it, make another small one, work on it. We've thrown a lot at you. A lot of this is sort of the conceptual from bouncing onto a bunch of boards that Alan and Dale believe, but it's always unique. Every board is different. This is take a deep breath, what works for you or you think would work for you, try something,
Yeah.
and then try something else.
See, I think we've already started last year.
Oh, it absolutely sounds like it.
Yeah.
Should we build like a matrix as to where we want to be and then pick all these things out and like a timeline as far as what we would?
I would build the end state. I think an end state statement that you're after I don't know, I'd go with timeline because it's not gonna happen that way.
No, and the stage you're gonna go through you're gonna get sidetracked along the way, and there's gonna be
Right.
something that takes your
Yes.
attention.
Real
and-
life.
So, I think Dale's right, you say, here's where we wanna end up.
Right.
Now, what's the first step in that? I mean, is it gonna be, all right, we're gonna have a board, we're gonna create a board management committee to set the agenda, and that's what we're gonna do. That's the only thing we're gonna do, we're gonna set the agenda, and that's it. And change maybe the frequency